Luke chapter 19, verses 11 through 27. We are looking at the parable of the talents as it's written in the book of Matthew. It's only about minas here, but ultimately this is a parable about stewardship. Stewardship is the one other major theme as we look back at the last few chapters, chapter 17, really back in 16, going all the way through 19. Stewardship has been one of the major themes about the kingdom and how kingdom people are to live. They're to live as good stewards of what they've been given. So with that concept in mind, we get this parable, and we're going to see a really cool link to what just happened. While they were listening to this, he went on to tell them a parable because he was near Jerusalem and the people thought that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. So immediately you should be thinking, okay, what does listening to this refer to? All right, and the answer, right, if we go back to verses 1 through 10, is Zacchaeus and his promise to give half of his possessions to the poor, to repay anyone he's defrauded 4 times what he's taken from them. And as they're listening to that, to this change in Zacchaeus, Jesus builds the bridge from stewardship to the kingdom of God. Okay? This is the major reason for why Jesus is giving this, right? We are given this because, word here, very important, because people thought, right? They have a mistaken view that the kingdom of God was going to appear at once. There was all this expectation of what would happen when Jesus got to Jerusalem, that the kingdom of God would appear at once. Jesus is getting near Jerusalem. And so Jesus takes this moment to teach about the coming kingdom of God, but also about stewardship, one of these major themes. And Zacchaeus, of course, serves as a wonderful tie there. So we're going to go to our plot arc for this one and just acknowledge our opening scene, verse 11. Jesus teaches on stewardship. Tying together Zacchaeus and expectations about the kingdom. So that is where our parable begins. That's verse 11. Okay? Go back to the text. He said, "A man of noble birth went to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. So he called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 minas. 'Put this money to work,' he said, 'until I come back.'" Okay, this is our opening picture. We have a man of noble birth. He is royalty, but we're not told what specifically, just a man of noble birth. He is going to a distant country to have himself appointed king and then to return. This is not so strange for especially the people of Israel. Herod the Great, who's now dead, but when he became king, he had to go to Rome to have the Caesar crown him as king. And once that happened, he came back. So this idea is very understandable for them. Man of noble birth goes to a distant country, he becomes king, and then he returns. So he called 10 of his servants, right? So the man has these servants, and they're going to have to take care of business while he's gone. He gives each of them 10 minas. We have 10 servants and 10 minas. That's not 10 minas for each of them. It's 1 mina for each of them. A mina is worth about 4 months' salary, a little bit less than that. It's equal to 100 days of labor. So we're not talking about a large portion of money. And we're seeing that each one of them gets the same. So again, this is very different than maybe the parable of talents, in which everybody gets a different amount. Here, everyone gets the same amount. "Put this money to work," he said, "until I come back." At this point, this parable is more similar to maybe the parable of the sower, where everyone gets the same amount of gospel, if you will. They all get the same seed, but some people are going to produce 30, 60, and 100 times the fruit. Well, that's kind of what we have going on here. Everyone has one mina, and we're going to see the differences in their profitability. He says, put this money to work until I come back. So the people that serve him are given one instruction. One instruction. Put it to work. There's no minimum or maximum amount that they're expected to get a return on here. The only thing they're not allowed to do is just sit on the money. As long as you put the money to work, right? Now, there's of course an expectation of profit, but as long as the money goes to work, you'll be fine. And do it now and do it until I come back, right? That's what's instructed. Okay, so let's go to our plot arc, and we'll go verses 12 through 13 here. The nobleman goes away to become king and gives his servants a little money to invest. That's simple. All right. We'll continue on. Verse 14. Here is our first turn in the story. His subjects hated him. But his subjects hated him and sent a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. Okay, we're not given any reasons why, and that's not really important. But we're told is that his subjects hated him. This line right here is very much directed towards the Pharisees, to the leaders of the nation, to the Sadducees. These are the ones who are going to reject their king. The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. They even send a delegation after him to say, we don't want this man to be our king. By the way, it will be a delegation that goes to Pilate to have Jesus crucified. And when when Pilate says, here is your king, they will say, we don't want this man to be our king. We want Caesar to be our king. We have no king but Caesar. So Jesus' words here are quite prophetic. All right, that's the next part of our story. Verse 14. Some of his subjects reject him. Okay. But this is subjects, not servants, okay? We're now going back to servants. That'll be the next part of this. Verse 15. He was made king, however, and returned home. Oops. He was made king, however, right? So this delegation could not stop him becoming king. He was made king, however, and returned home. Then he sent for the servants to whom he had given the money in order to find out what they had gained with it. Okay? So again, the expectation is for gain, but the command simply is to put the money to work. And he was made king and he returns home. So verse 15, the man returns a king and gets an account of how his money was invested. All right. Verse 16. The first one came back. Sir, your mina has earned 10 more. Well done, my good servant, his master replied. Because you have been trustworthy in a very small matter, take charge of 10 cities. This is just a simple award ceremony, right? Let's look at first what the servant says. He says, Sir, your mina has earned 10 more. This is important that we know what's going on here. The earning power from the mina, the servant does not give credit to himself. He gives credit to the mina itself. He says, your mina has earned 10 more. If we were to talk about our faith, We'd be talking about our faith as a gift, and that faith at work produces fruit, and that God would get the credit for that. And that's how this servant is talking. Your mina has earned 10 more. Well done, my good servant. So this gets returned with praise because you've been trustworthy in a very small matter. Take charge of 10 cities. If you think back to the parable of the shrewd manager, that was Jesus's comment at the end. He said, whoever is trustworthy with little will be trustworthy with much. And here Jesus says, because you've been trustworthy in a very small manner. A mina was not a lot of money. Take charge of 10 cities. If that doesn't tell you that the king has returned, right? That's it right there. Now the king is the one in charge of all these cities. And he rewards this one who has taken 1 mina and turned it into 10, right? This is a 1,000% increase. That's a pretty good return. Take charge of 10 cities. And so what we see is a reward in proportion to faithfulness here. Faithfulness. Look at what he is commended for. You have been trustworthy. You have been trustworthy in a very small manner. He doesn't actually commend so much the profitability as he does the trustworthiness of this servant. But nevertheless, the reward to take charge of 10 cities is proportionate to this growth. And so what we see is that everybody kind of given the same gift of the faith of the gospel. It doesn't become equally profitable in everybody's hands. The profit ultimately comes from what God is doing in us, but also there's an effort on our parts to be in alignment with that, to work with that. And God is just in his rewards. He gives rewards according to faithfulness, according to fruitfulness as well. And so we have verses 16 and 17. And what we see here, again, is a very faithful and fruitful servant is praised and rewarded. And then verses 18 and 19. The second came and said, Sir, your mina has earned 5 more. And the master answered, you take charge of 5 cities. He doesn't get the big well done and all that kind of stuff. But I think we should take that as a truncating of the story, not as any kind of note that somehow this isn't good enough. And we see that the same proportionate reward is being given here, and the same talking, same speech on the behalf of the servant. Your mina has earned 5 more. Not that your servant has earned 5 more, but your mina has done the work. So, wrong one. So now we'll come up to verse 18 and 19. And the less profitable or the less fruitful servant is also rewarded and generously. Taking charge over a whole city because you've done well with a mina is really quite a generous reward, but that is what the master is doing. And we can kind of see this with the most profitable, the next profitable down, and now we get to this guy who hasn't been profitable at all. Then another servant came and said, Sir, here is your mina. I have laid it away in a piece of cloth. I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. You take out what you did not put in and reap what you did not sow. Let's look at what this guy is saying. Another servant came and said, Sir, here is your mina. I'm just giving back to you what you gave to me. Here it is. What did he do with it? I have kept it laid away in a piece of cloth, in a kitchen towel. I put your money in a kitchen towel. That is a crazy thing to do with so much money. To just leave it someplace wrapped up in a napkin is insane. and it's clearly disobedient. He was told to put the money to work. Putting it in a cloth is just disobedience, just straight up disobedience. So he says, here's your mina. I'm just giving back to you what you gave to me. I've kept it in a piece of cloth. And then he gives his reason. He says, I was afraid of you because you are a hard man. And he explains the hard man with this. You take out what you did not put in, and you reap what you did not sow. So number one is you take out what you didn't put in. Two, you reap what you did not sow. He's saying, you are a hard man who is so focused on money that I was so terrified to lose any of it, so I didn't do anything. I kept it laid away because I know you're so greedy, you're so desirous for fruitfulness that if I lost anything, I'd be in big trouble. You're a hard man. Well, everything that we just saw with the gifts he just gave out would lead us to believe that that's an exaggeration, but and just straight up untrue. So at verse 20, we're left wondering, is he really afraid? Is this really what's going on? Is this really how he sees the master? Because it seems different than the master, and also, well, as we're going to see here at verse 22, that doesn't seem like maybe the best thing to do if you're afraid that of your master's character here. So we'll go back to our plot arc and we'll look at verses 20 through 21. The unfruitful servant gives back the mina and says, boss is mean and greedy. All right. The master's reply is really the pinnacle of this whole thing. His master replied, I will judge you by your words, you wicked servant. Right? So the other one was a good one. This one is a wicked one. You knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in, reaping what I did not sow? Why then didn't you put my money on deposit, so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest? All right. I'll go one more. Then he said to those standing by, take away his mina from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. All right. So the master says, I will judge you by your own words. I'm going to judge you by this statement right here, that I'm a hard man who takes out what he doesn't put in and reaps what he does not sow. He said, let's test whether or not you are living up to what you believe or what you say you believe about me. I will judge you by your own words. And then he says, you wicked servant, which means that unlike the other ones who were trustworthy, this one is wicked. You knew, did you, that I am a hard man, taking out what I did not put in, reaping what I did not sow. This is the using of this guy's words. He's saying the logical thing to do, if you really believe that about me, is why didn't you put my money on deposit? Literally, it's put it on the table, which is to put it into the hands of the money lenders. And the money lenders would lend the money at interest. You can come back, you can get your money back with interest. Why didn't you put my money on deposit with the money lenders, right? On the table, so that when I came back, I could have collected it with interest. He said, hey, I get it. You're not making 1,000%. You're not making 500% because you don't understand me, right? But if you did, if you really did, and if you really understood me in this way, you could at least have gotten, 5% or 10% through the money lenders. But you didn't even do that. You just put it in a piece of cloth. This is crazy. This is an unsafe thing to do. It doesn't make any money. It doesn't even accord with the man's own words. What we see is that he really is wicked. Maybe not like those ones who sent a delegation out to go get the other, to try to keep this man from becoming king. He's wicked in a different way. He's lazy, he's unfaithful, he's untrustworthy, he's disobedient, and more than anything else, he mischaracterizes his master. What he proves is that he doesn't know. He doesn't know the master. Even though he says he does, I know you're a man who's this way. That's not really what's going on. He doesn't actually know the master, and the master proves that by just saying, you're not actually doing what you say you believe. So take away his mina and give it to the one who has 10 minas. So verses 22 through verses 24 are really the pinnacle of this whole thing. And they show us that this servant did not know his master and was wicked and untrustworthy and lost his mina. And right, it also went to the one who had more, which is important and not the main point, but also a pretty common thing, right? That God is going to move those things around and help and give more responsibility to those who have been proving themselves faithful. Now, the rest of this is kind of the falling action of this parable, and there are more lessons to be learned, but they're not really the main lesson for us as kingdom people. We have this example in the negative, and we have these examples in the positive to teach us about stewardship in the kingdom of God, and that stewardship is really related, all of this is really related to know God, know him, know the truth about him, know him relationally, and you will be able to be faithful. But if you don't know God, and if you get his character wrong, all sorts of bad things happen as a result. Okay. Verse 25. Sir, they said, he already has 10. So quick point here. Verse 25. Jealousy from other servants. This is one of the things that we see in other parables as well, the laborers and their denarius. And we just want to be clear here with this is not a good thing. Don't be jealous about other servants and what they have or don't have, which seems to be more than you or less than you. Let that go. And then we get verses 26 and 27. He replied, I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. This whole last section is about judgment. And I say that in a neutral way, meaning not neutral, but in both senses, positive and negative. What we have is the first group, everyone who has, right? They have the mina, but more importantly than that, they have true faith. They know who their God is, and they live accordingly. That's the positive. This is going to be judged to be true. More will be given. This is the judgment for Christians is a judgment of reward. We see that very clearly in 1 Corinthians 3. And then there's this other person, the one who has nothing. Even what they have will be taken away. That seems illogical. How can someone who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away? That doesn't mean they have something. And Jesus' point here, this is now getting to the negative, is, yeah, everybody started with a mina, but because this guy didn't know his master, he really had nothing. So you have the mina, but you don't know the master, what's the point? He has nothing. Even what he has, which is that mina, will be taken away. It's given to the other one. So this is what we're really wondering as we read this. What we're left with wondering is, where does this wicked servant go? In 1 Corinthians 3, we see this go in two ways, for the positive and for the negative. In the positive, there is gold, silver, precious stones that last forever. But in the negative, they escape but as one through the flames. Meaning that there are people in heaven, but they have nothing. Maybe that's what he's talking about. In which case, this servant is going to, go into the kingdom to come with nothing. Or this is more similar to what we see at the end of Matthew 25, separating the sheep from the goats. And it's saying that he's, with these enemies who are about to get killed. We don't really know. And I don't think that's the main point of Jesus's thing here, because I don't think what Jesus really wants to do is necessarily motivate us to faithfulness by fear. I think he wants to motivate us to faithfulness by knowing God. So that's the big piece that I would put here, verse 26. Motivate faithfulness. Faithfulness by knowing God and his judgments. And then verse 27 is going to be the judgment of enemies. Back to the beginning of this whole thing. Those who did not want me to be king, bring them here and kill them in front of me. He hasn't forgotten about them, right? Back here at the beginning, verse 15. Oh, not verse 15, verse 14. The delegation that comes, those guys are going down. So that's verse 27, which means that, again, why is this parable different than the one in Matthew? Because a big part of this parable that we don't necessarily see in the Matthew one is about these guys being killed, these ones who don't want Jesus to be king, that they will be killed in front of him. So again, we don't know where the wicked servant goes, if he's counted among the enemies or not. But we do see this negative judgment coming upon both of them, and a incredibly positive one for everybody else. What this calls us to do is be faithful, to be fruitful, to know our God, and to know that he's coming back, and that at his coming there will be a reckoning. There you go. That is Luke chapter 19, verses 11 through 27.